Hey guys, today we are going to learn about watercolor. We're going to talk about the basic watercolor setup, what you need to wake up the paint, how to use your water bowl, paintbrush, different types of paper, and then we're going to go over two techniques that are pretty basic to our watercolor. So what you see in front of you are the supplies. Now my water bowls are going to look a little different than what we have in our art room because I'm doing this at home, but two small bowls works great. Then you need your watercolor brush, which are our yellow handled paintbrushes. And then we have two different brands of paint. We have the Prang and we have Crayola. They're the same things. They're called pan paints, so either one will work. The paper is a little different. If you are just starting with your watercolor exploration, you're going to want to use our basic painting paper. That's our thicker paper, and it'll work just fine. But if you have reached a higher level, an expert level on your watercolor, you can ask me if you can use the watercolor paper. This is a little thicker and it does just a little bit more. I'm going to show you both of those today. The reason I have two water bowls is so that I have a clean water and a wash water. That way, when I do my wet on wet watercolor technique, I have clean water to use instead of water that's going to start getting dirty. And you guys know how the watercolor will get dirty. What I'm going to do today, I'm going to show you these two techniques on one paper. So I am going to fold my paper in half. You don't traditionally need to do that, but that'll just give you a line for where the difference is. The first technique, this is the one you guys are most used to, is called a dry brush. So you're just going to get your brush wet a little bit, because remember we need water to wake up the paint. Remember, swirl and swipe, no tapping. And then waking up the paint is just taking your brush and adding some water to it. And now if I need to clean my brush, remember I go over to that second bowl. This is now my dirty bowl. You can see it turning blue, but I still swirl and swipe. Alright, so now that I've woke up a paint, I'm going to take it and just paint my design in there. Whatever you're choosing to do. I'm just doing some lines to show you how this works. Okay, cleaning my brush, I'm going to wake up another color. And with the dry brush technique, cleaning your brush in between after waking up is a good way to do it. That way you don't have too much water on your brush, and you can overlap with watercolor. You can do a lot of different things with it that give you some interesting designs. You might notice when I start off that my color is darker and it gets lighter. That is due to the amount of water on my brush. So if I clean my brush, swirl and swipe, and then actually pinch out the water, and just use the little bit that's still on my woken up color. I'm going to swirl to pick up the color. Remember, you want to keep that hairdo nice and neat. When I paint, you're going to notice the color is a lot darker. But, and see that little line there, that's how you know you're doing a dry brush. You don't have a lot of water, so it's not spreading that color. If I want a lighter color, I'm going to get that swirl and swipe and not pinch. Still swirling to pick up the color, but it just starts off that slightly lighter and it'll get lighter as you go. That's our dry technique. Okay, wet on wet is pretty much what it sounds like. The first important step, let me clean my brush, is using that clean water. I'm actually going to paint just with water over my whole paper. This is quick because you don't want your water to dry, and if you want to do it in sections, that works too. My paper's small enough, if you see it's smaller than my hand, that I think I can be quick enough. But you're going to paint the whole thing with clean water, and then we're going to wake up some colors. I'm going to go with some warm colors on this side. So you're still waking up your colors in the same way. But because there is water already on my brush, or on my paper, sorry, see how that spreads out and the color's a lot lighter? You also don't have to clean your brush as much here. This gives you a really good gradient. See that dark to light? It also spreads. You have a little less control over it. Clean my brush and get another color, and you'll see how some of this will blend. Do an orange to go with that red. So if I go next to it, I'm getting that dark to light gradient still, but it blends together really well. If you notice on the dry side, it overlapped where you can see the two colors. It didn't blend very much. So this wet on wet technique really helps it blend. Something you can do, like that one that ran, when I paint over it, it kind of will fix that. Or you could take a piece of paper towel and blot that out if you'd like. This is a really good technique, the wet on wet, for filling up your whole paper. Switch over to some yellow. Filling up your whole paper with color and then actually adding to it when it's dry. Or it gives you a good like sunset look, just looking at the colors choices that I made and things like that. Just a little bit different than the dry technique. And if you notice, I don't have to go back to my water very often because there's already water on my paper. Okay, I'm going to show you the watercolor paper and just the Crayola paint. Like I said, there's not a whole difference between the two brands, but I want to show you both of them just so you see. So you might notice that on the wet on wet, I got a little ripple in my paper. That will flatten out as it dries, and we can always lay it underneath something heavy, so it's not a problem. But the watercolor paper is going to be a little better. And it's going to do that just a little bit less. So like I did with that paper, I folded it in half just to show you the two techniques. Clean my brush, get some fresh. I have to wake up this paint because I haven't used it yet. And you might notice the difference in how it spreads. You can see the dry technique a little quicker on the watercolor paper, how it goes kind of thin and doesn't cover as much. The one thing with the dry brush technique is it's not as easy to fix mistakes. It's still possible. Paint will cover paint to an extent. We'll look at fixing mistakes with watercolor in a different video, but just something to keep in mind as you're going, that the wet on wet is a little easier to fix mistakes. Let me show you that wet on wet. Oops, as I slosh our water, not something we want to do, right? Luckily I can just use that little drip. Again, clean water all over the paper. The nice part about this, since you've got a clean water bowl, is if it does dry before you get to it, you just add more water. So we already got a little bit of a bend in our paper, but if you notice, it's not as much of a ripple as the other paper, but same thing. It'll flatten out a little bit when it dries, and we can always put it under something heavy to flatten it more. Another neat thing with the wet on wet, oopsie, I'm using the wrong water bowl. Another thing with the wet on wet is if your color starts off too dark, like maybe I wanted this lighter, I can clean my brush, get that fresh water, and just paint over it with clean water and see how that thinned that color out and spread it out more. So that's just artistic decisions you're making along the way. But that's one of those ways you can fix mistakes with this wet on wet technique that you don't have the opportunity as much with the dry brush. When you overlap, like I'm going a little bit over that red with the yellow, I do want to make sure I clean my brush between my colors so that I don't get the paint in the pan. Remember, this is a pan. so I don't get that dirty for the next person, because we are sharing our paints. And if you notice there's a hole in the middle of this one, there's still paint on the edges. It doesn't mean the paint's all gone. Something I hear you guys say a lot, that my paint's empty. It's not empty, it's just running low. Spread that out a little bit more. That got a little dry. But that is our basic watercolor setup. That is also our 2 basic watercolor techniques. We'll look at some other techniques as we go. Don't forget to clean your brush so that when you wash on your hands, see how no color comes off? That's how you know it's ready to get put back away. We don't leave them in the tray. We leave them in our brush container, hair up, to dry. Okay, I hope you learned a little bit something here, and you can have fun exploring with your watercolors in our paint studio.